It's been a lot of learning today. All right, let's do this. Okay, so today, just continuing our theme of writing instruction, I'm going to be talking a little bit about supporting vocabulary development during writing instruction across the day. Everyone hear me and see the slides? Good to go? Okay. So before I get going on writing, I always like to do just a little brief review about some of the big ideas about vocabulary development that we have talked about before. Then I'm going to talk about some new ideas related to vocabulary development and writing, meaning new, like I haven't talked with you about them before. And then the third part is some how-to information. So what should we teach? Okay, so that you can support your teachers with that. So some background on vocabulary development, why it's important in writing, and then some how-to. Okay, so just making the connections between Essential 6, which we've been talking about all day, and Essential 7, vocabulary development. Okay, so some of the big ideas that I always like to do reminders on about vocabulary development that we've talked about before, and then I'm going to add on some new ideas. Okay, so we've talked a lot about word meanings mattering for text comprehension, for learning across the content areas, and really for anything new that we learn, right? Inside or outside of school, for learning something new, for building new knowledge, there are going to be words associated with that knowledge. We've talked a lot about how words and conceptual knowledge are interconnected. So I always show you that iceberg picture where I say that the actual word that we say, the label, is just the tip of the iceberg, but all of the ideas associated with that word, all of the knowledge, all of the concepts are what we're really connecting with that word. And then we've talked a lot before about definitional knowledge not being enough if our goal is to use vocabulary to read, to write, to speak, to listen, and to learn. So just memorizing a definition, it's not going to give us enough information about words to be able to do those things. And I really like to think about vocabulary not just as an isolated skill, but really as purposeful. The words we use to read, to write, to speak, to listen, to learn, okay, across school and really across life. So how do we learn new words? And I'm repeating all of this. I know you've heard me say it before. I'm repeating all of this so I can connect back to it when we think about writing, okay? So how do we learn new words? We've talked about repeated exposure to words in meaningful contexts. So what do I mean by that? I mean that we hear or use or engage with words multiple times, and by meaningful contexts, that we get some meaning information about those words, or we connect those words to ideas, to concepts that we're learning. We learn words that are relevant and useful. So just being given a list of words to memorize that are out of context and have absolutely no use in our life, well, it's pretty unlikely we're going to retain those. We might be able to memorize them for the test the next day, but a week later or a year later, we're not likely to hold on to those words. In comparison, if they're words we're going to need to discuss ideas, to discuss what we're learning, to discuss our thinking, to debate, to have conversations, any of that, those are the words we're going to hold on to because they're useful. Okay. And then we learn words when we have opportunities for active processing. So this is thinking and talking about the meaning of words. So this might be things like comparing and contrasting the meaning of different words, attempting to use those words in our speech, examples of words, applying the words to exploration activities that might be going on in school and beyond. So any of those things help us to learn words. Okay, and when do we learn words? Well, we learn words through conversations, right? Or engaging in discussion and dialogue. You've all seen young children who pick up the words that are in their environment around them. I used to joke with my kindergartners that I was on the weekends that I was going to go home and put my feet up and have some relaxation. And they'd always be asking me about they'd say it's Friday. That means Mrs. Wright is going to be doing some relaxation. But that is how it is, right? The words we use around children, for good or for bad, are the words that they pick up. We, of course, learn new words when we read. Texts are a wonderful place to encounter words, particularly words we may not use in our everyday oral language. So we talked a lot about Essential 2, read alouds being a rich context for vocabulary learning, and some of the ways that we can be explicit in making sure that kids are learning the meaning of words that are going to help them comprehend read aloud texts, but also that we're selecting some of those words to keep thinking about and using beyond the text. And then we learn new words when we learn new things. And of course, we've talked a lot about learning vocabulary across the content areas in school, not having vocabulary be something that's supplemental or 5 minutes a day or word of the day, but really thinking about engaging with kids and teachers to design vocabulary instruction into the units of study that are happening in a classroom in order to make sure that all kids can participate and are aware of the words, to give them some precise language to talk about the ideas they're encountering. Okay, a super fast review. So hopefully all of that sounds familiar, and these are the kinds of things you've been talking about with the teachers that you're working with. Now we can move on to talking about something that I've never had the opportunity to discuss in all the years of our Literacy Coaching Network, which is thinking about vocabulary specifically for writing instruction. So some new ideas related to writing instruction that we haven't had the opportunity to discuss before. Not surprisingly, to anyone who's tried to write or compose anything at all, word meanings matter for writing. And in fact, this sounds super obvious, but wonderful researchers have actually looked into this quite systematically and found that even for young children, 2nd, 4th, 5th graders, vocabulary is predictive of writing quality. And it contributes to writing quality in addition to some of the other things that we might know, right? So some things like aligning with the genre, right? Or sometimes kids score better on writing rubrics if they just write more, like length, to express their ideas. Vocabulary adds to writing quality above some of the other things that we know about writing. And that makes a lot of sense, right? If we're trying to express our ideas in written form, we don't have the chance to explain in the way we do in oral language, to maybe use gestures, facial expressions, all of the other ways we can communicate when we're interacting with someone in oral language in person. So it makes a lot of sense that we have to be maybe more careful with our words, more specific, more precise when we're engaging in writing in order to convey our ideas to the audience. So across narrative, persuasive, informative text genres, which are the ones that we typically think of in elementary school, the words that kids use to express their ideas are going to make a big difference to the quality of their writing and to their ability to express what it is and they want to say and share their ideas. What else is a new idea related to writing instruction? Maybe not a new idea, but something really important to think about, which is this idea that children cannot write using words they don't know well enough to use in their expressive language. So if we think about reading comprehension or listening, typically, if we know a little bit about the meaning of a word, it can still help us to understand quite a bit. Maybe to support comprehension a little bit, right? Maybe we know part of the word meaning. maybe we know the prefix. It can give us a sense, oh, that word is kind of is something a bit negative. And that helps us to, or a bit positive, right? That helps us to understand something about the text or something about what someone's saying. But we need a lot more word knowledge to use a word in our expressive language. And think about that for yourself, right? Maybe you're reading an article in the newspaper, you encounter a word you kind of ish know about, you either skip it or you know a little bit about it, or you look at it up in the dictionary, and you're fine with that, right? But to use that word, especially to use that word in your writing, you really have to know a lot about it. Not just a definition is probably not going to be enough, right? You need to know how it's used, right? Something about the part of speech, like, is it a verb? Is it a noun? How am I going to use it? What's its connotation? What's somebody else going to understand if they see this word? So you need quite a lot of information. So this really suggests that if we want kids to use new vocabulary in their writing, we have to be doing really rich vocabulary learning in other parts of the day, right? So that when it comes to kids expressing their ideas through writing, they have enough knowledge about the words they need to use to be able to write them down and use them to convey their ideas. Something else that matters a lot for writing, and again, because in written language, oh, for some reason I have a capital on exclaimed, but that seems so appropriate. I must have been really excited about exclamations. So ignore my capital in my list. Okay. So just back to my train of thought, precision really matters in writing. So I was thinking about different words that we might use to mean said when we're writing. If a character said something, okay, whispered means something very different to announced. Mentioned, right, means something different to exclaimed. If you just comment on something versus you disclose something, which suggests it's something secretive, right? If you alleged something, there's something about suggesting that maybe somebody did something wrong that you're accusing them of, right? If you shout something, it might mean you're angry or super excited. So all of these have slightly different meanings and convey something different to an audience. And again, when you're in written language, this really is different to oral language because you can't really explain or show, right? So I can exclaim something without saying I exclaimed it when I talk to you. But if you were describing what I was up to, you'd have to clarify that for someone who wasn't in the room. Okay. So this is all really important when we think about children's writing, because as many of you know, the go-to for most kids, if they tried to write some dialogue, would be said Tanya, right? It's a nice day, said Tanya. And that doesn't really convey very much information about how it was said, why it was said, the intent. And we can shift the language a little bit to be more precise, that maybe would give a lot more information about what the character was up to when they were speaking. So those three things matter a lot. Vocabulary matters for the quality of what kids write. They need to have enough information about words to be able to use them, and they need to have nuanced information about words to pick the right or precise word to convey their ideas and their meaning. All right, so I thought it would be fun, if I can see the chat, for everyone else to let's just for something fun, let's try doing some more nuanced words for walked. Okay, so what might be some other ways kids could say walked? All right, I'm loving this. Let's see. Traipsed, love it. Strutted, loped, strolled, zoomed. So zoomed only means this thing we're doing now. It's lost all other meaning to my life. I'm just kidding. Trotted, awesome. Staggered, strutted, strolled, jaunted, ambled, galloped, sauntered, skipped, marched, scurried, Okay. So like, just think about having conversations with kids about the difference between sauntered and scurried, right? Very different meanings. And certainly a lot more information being conveyed than just saying walked, stomped, right? Swaggered, shuffled, right? There's some really wonderful words here. Meandered. Sorry, I'm just enjoying this. Tiptoed, lumbered, slithered. My word nerd is coming out, guys. Paraded. I'm trying to look for new ones that we haven't said yet. Okay, so lots of wonderful words to think about, lots of wonderful words to teach, but of course, children aren't going to use these words, pranced, unless we make sure they know them and are encouraging them to use them. Oh, someone said moseyed. I love that word. To use them in their writing. Plotted, sashayed, trudged. What a collection of words. I know. I love it. Okay. Well, thanks for participating in that. I could just do that all day. I'll just throw words out and see all the wonderful words that all of you come up with. But it's really, it's a big deal. And think about when you've tried to do writing and you sit there and you're really trying to think of the best word or phrase to really convey what's in your head. And that's what we want kids to be able to do, right? That's always what we want kids to do. We want to be able to see them share their ideas. We want to value their ideas. We want to understand their ideas. And one way to support this is to really think about this, this nuance in word meaning. Okay, so vocabulary instruction is important as part of writing. Words matter. So what are we going to teach kids as part of writing instruction? Well, first of all, and I always start with this, we have to have time for writing. If we want kids to use words in their writing, we need to have writing in the day. So that includes writing instructional time, but that also includes creating opportunities for kids to engage in writing for lots of different purposes across the day, because we might use different words for different purposes. So kids can use writing to plan their work, to make predictions about what is going to happen, to gather information, to share their thinking, to keep a record of ideas as we're engaging in conversations or over time across a unit, to convince someone to make a change. We're talking a little bit about that this morning, to explain to someone how to do things, to say thank you. So these are some of the ways outside of what might be considered, these are just some brainstorms, right? Outside of what might be considered writing time, we might want to think about writing with children. And then we might want to think about the words that are associated with these times. So you'd use a different set of vocabulary to say thank you, right? Or express gratitude than to make a prediction in all likelihood, right? So we're going to help kids with some of the words that they might use across these different contexts. Okay. And of course, also we want to have specific time to focus on writing. And of course, also we want to write across the different content areas, and different content areas are going to have different types of writing associated with that content area. And for more on that, you can come tomorrow to hear me talk about writing during science and some of the specialized types of writing kids might get the opportunities to do during science that they wouldn't maybe get to do during other times of the day. Okay, so we have to have time to do writing. And then we need to think a little bit about what to teach, and also encouraging children to use what they've learned and to make connections to what they've learned in other parts of the day, like during read alouds and during content area learning in their writing. So a couple of tips that I hope you'll pass on to the teachers you're working with that I like to think about to bring those words from read aloud and content area learning into children's opportunities for writing is to create word collections for children to reference. And I like the term word collections better than word walls. Do not need a wall to collect words on. It doesn't need to take up the whole wall. And the wall also sort of implies that it's this static thing that gets put up and the words are sort of decorating the walls, and then that just stays there. But I like to think about collecting words associated with the content we're learning. So any particular unit of study might have words that we're collecting that help kids to talk about and write about the ideas from that unit. So that might create a collection. But we can also collect words with shades of meaning, just like we just did with said and walk. So here you can see one class collected words that meant went. Okay. So went from one place to another, drove, rode, ran, walked, skipped, hopped, crawled, galloped, hurried, scampered, and tiptoed. And they collected these words over time across the year during read alouds. So because they knew they were collecting went words, as they engaged in all sorts of different read alouds, when a went word came up, kids would notice that and add it to the list. So word collections don't have to be on chart paper and they don't have to be on walls. We can keep digital word collections, say Google Docs that kids have access to when they're writing, where they can look up collections of words that have particular meanings, and we can add to them digitally. We can have binders that have a different page for some of the words we might want to collect meanings for. I've seen a lot of these, right? Words that, especially for words kids commonly use in their writing. They often say, I went to the park, it was nice. So we might collect other words for nice. It was fun. We might have a word collection for fun, right? And so then when children do that in their writing, we can say, go to our class word collection for fun, see if there's a word that's more precise that might help you to share a little bit more about your experiences. Okay, so big fan of word collections, both content area and just over read alouds over time. You're unlikely to find multiple words for fun in one read aloud, but across all the read alouds of the year, you're going to find a lot of fun words for fun. And that's awesome when kids need to use those. Okay. What to teach? A little bit more about genres, right? Genre specific words. So as we study mentor texts in a particular genre that we want kids to write, we want to also look for words associated with that genre. So I did an example here of words to express an opinion, right? I believe, I claim, I think, assert, propose, consider, view, perspective, contend, which has a period for some reason. I have a lot of typos this time. I'm sorry, everybody. I'll clean it up before I send you the official version. Argue, stance, agree, disagree, evidence, reconsider. Okay, so just as an example. And so we can go through pretty much any type, right, of any genre we want kids to write in, or any sort of subgenre that we're interested in having kids write in. And we can think, as we look through mentor texts, of a word collection associated with the vocabulary that kids might really need to convey their ideas in that genre. Okay. What else to teach? Okay. Well, encouraging spelling approximations, or sometimes called estimated spelling. Some people call it invented spelling. That's not my favorite. I think I've told you that before. Is going to help a lot with making sure that kids use some of the new vocabulary that they're learning as part of their writing. So if we're insisting on conventional spelling, kids are definitely going to write, I went to the park, it was nice, because they know how to spell those words conventionally. Or I had a nice trip, but I'd really prefer to see breathtaking scenery than nice trip. That's what that says. If you didn't catch that one, because that's much more precise writing and tells me a lot more, and it gives kids the freedom to express their ideas. I don't know if any of you are watching that Abbott Elementary show that's on TV right now. If you haven't, you should check it out. It's like a comedy commentary on elementary schools right now, but there's a whole scene that I was watching last night where one of the teachers is interpreting children's pictures for another for another teacher who couldn't understand what kids were drawing in their pictures. It was stuff like, if you see a big round circle, that's probably a head. So anyway, interpreting kids' writing is a wonderful, wonderful challenge, but they're really going to limit what they say if we don't allow for them to spell words how they sound. That doesn't mean we can't go back and ask them to apply any of the letter sound patterns that they have learned, but especially in drafting their work, if we want to see the wonderful vocabulary to express their ideas, we're going to want to make sure that we allow children to spell words how they sound. Okay, and so of course I couldn't resist sharing some adorableness here. The first one says, "Dear Tooth Fairy, I have a question, Queshtin. Why do fairies go and get teeth in the middle of the night? Please write back, magically yours, Ella." And that Wright is, of course, because Ella is my daughter, and that's how she thought Wright should be spelled, because it was her name. And there's a to-do list: to make my bed, clean my room, sweep the floors, straighten out the basement, wipe the table, which actually says whip the table, but how awesome is there a WH in there? I love it. Help Dad make lunch, straighten the carpet, make the couch. I don't know what make the couch means, but got to make the couch. Wash the dishes and make the table. I don't know why anybody's making a table, but that one definitely says make the table. Okay, so of course, encouraging estimated spelling is going to help kids to use a broader range of vocabulary in their writing. Okay, encouraging meaning approximations too. So this gets back to the classroom community and valuing children's ideas, even if those ideas aren't conventionally correct at all times. So this includes when words aren't used conventionally, right? When kids take a risk and try to use a word different, and it may be used differently than what it means in adult world. And that's because they're taking a chance, they're trying something new, and that's to be valued, and that is wonderful. So a couple of examples of this: a child used the word extinct, described extinct as what happens after a skunk has sprayed another animal. It's extinct. It doesn't have stink anymore. So attempt to use morphology. Used to have stink, extinct. Okay. But okay, also, how awesome is that? That's some morphological knowledge right there, what X means, and assumed it was stink, S-T-I-N-K. But that's super awesome. Here's another example. And I don't know if any of you ever read The Tale of Despero with your classes, or teachers who do use The Tale of Despero, but there's a chapter in there called Perfidy Unlimited, and kids learn that perfidy is an act of purposeful loyalty or treachery. And so a kid learned about the word perfidy and then wrote the next day that my sister perfidied me because she hid her stuffed animal. Okay, so perfidy is not a verb. You can't perfidy someone. You commit an act of perfidy. But how awesome is that, to read a chapter that has a new word, to learn about the word, and then to try to use it as a writer. Okay, and that is to be encouraged. That doesn't mean we can't share with the child afterwards that how the word is conventionally used, but what's even probably more important than that is to value and to encourage the attempt. So again, that is part of making sure that the classroom community is focused on the ideas that children are sharing, and not perfect or conventional ways of sharing those ideas. And allows for some risk taking, right? So we want to be in a place where kids are not jumping on each other to correct each other, but rather are interested in what is being said and valuing the attempt to do so. Okay. What else to teach? Okay, so modeling attention to word choice. That includes when maybe the teacher is writing, making sure the teacher is modeling attention, but also to teaching some of the interesting ways that words can be used. And read alouds are, again, a wonderful place to call these out and to share these with kids. But also some word collections can be wonderful. So metaphors, similes, hyperbole, onomatopoeia, idioms, and encouraging kids to try some of these out in their writing. So again, if we're collecting examples, we can say, how about you try it? And then again, calling attention to word connotations, which is a little different to just all the different, making a list of words that might have a similar meaning, but really thinking about the difference. So what is the difference between if I say that I request something versus I demand it, right? That's a really subtle difference, but the one is, a polite ask, and the other is, I want that right now. So kids need to know that, because they need to know what they're conveying based on their word choice, and to really think through if they're using the word that truly represents what the meaning is that they're hoping to convey. So all in all, I'm really not even sure how we could do writing without talking about words and what words mean. Of course, that's going to be critical, but some of these specialized ways that we use words in written language especially are going to be important to point out to children. Okay, and then of course, noticing how children use words in their writing. This can help a lot with knowing what else needs to be taught, right? So are there words we've been teaching that lots of children are using in their writing? Well, that's really wonderful, because it suggests that kids are owning those words. They have enough knowledge around those words to use them expressively and not just receptively. They likely know some of the nuance about what that word means, the context for using those words. So that's awesome, right? And that's to be pointed out and noticed as we engage in conversations with children about their writing. Are there words that the teacher's been teaching that children don't seem confident to use, right? Even though that might be a wonderful word to use in that context. Well, then how can we suggest that to a child, or suggest that to the whole class, or make sure that those words come up again and that we bring them back. Maybe if a child uses a wonderful new word in their writing, that's a great time to have that student share, and maybe share why they chose to use that word and how that helped them to convey their ideas, and to point that out and notice it and share it with the group. Maybe children are using words in their writing that haven't come up in the classroom, but they're bringing those words from other parts of their life or other languages that they speak in their homes, and they've learned those words in other places. Well, why not use that as an opportunity to share the words that children bring with all the rest of the children in the class? So to notice that and point that out, and use children's word knowledge as an opportunity to share with the group and learn even more new words. And then always thinking about, what are the words I can teach because children need them to express their ideas as part of the learning, as part of the discussion, and as part of the writing in the classroom. So, I always say that vocabulary is opening the gate, right, to learning. It's about access, and we never want children to feel like they cannot participate or cannot express themselves or cannot share their ideas because they're uncomfortable with the words that they feel like they need to use. This is true in writing as well. So this being explicit about words, about vocabulary, is really important because it is providing kids access to the learning opportunities and access to being able to express their ideas and their thoughts in written language. So it's a really important part of what we do and what we think of as writing instruction. Okay, so summarizing here, and then I do have a little breakout, but maybe we won't do it because of time. I don't know. You can tell me. Okay, so just to point out, when I always say vocabulary matters for reading, writing, speaking, listening, and learning across disciplines, but the writing part, we've rarely had an opportunity to talk about it. It makes a difference, and it makes a difference to be explicit about it as part of thinking about a piece kids are writing. And remember, this can also be, doesn't have to be a first draft thing, right? We can go back to text and think about, okay, I've gotten my ideas out my head. Now, are there different words that I might use to more carefully or more precisely express those ideas? So this might be a revision kind of conversation, not an initial conversation. Planning for vocabulary across the day can seem challenging at first, including now I'm saying do it in writing also. So not just in the content areas, not just in read alouds, not just in reading instruction, but also in writing. It's in all the time across the day. Language is everywhere. How we express ourselves is everywhere. And so making sure that we think about it in the writing context as well. More about all of this in one of the chapters in my book, but I can't remember which one anymore. And the prompt I was hoping we could talk about are what are some ways you can support the teachers you work with to make connections between writing instruction and vocabulary instruction, specifically in your context, because you know the writing instruction that might already be happening in your context. But I'm not sure. I'm going to let Erin and Lisa and Annie tell us if we have time to have some discussions or if we're moving on to the next thing.
We do have time, Tanya. We are not going to go to break until 1:50. So,
okay.
Do you want us to come back after that, or are you concluding them to go to breakouts? It's up to you.
I think that it would be fine if everyone goes to breakouts, and then when they feel ready, they can move on. But if you have questions for me, of course, I'm always happy to answer them, and you can put them in the chat, or I haven't been checking the chat. Sorry.
No, thank you so much. We will launch those breakouts. So fantastic breakout facilitators, we are ready for you. We're going to put that Google Doc again into the chat, and most people were able to just click right on that and click into their specific Zoom link, but a few weren't able to, and so you might have to officially, click on that so you have it as a tab, but then leave this Zoom and go into a new one there. And for those couple people who had challenges, we just created the breakouts right here. So we will head into those conversations. They'll be a little shorter this time, but let's do that until about 1:52 or so. And then right from that breakout, you'll just manage your own time and head into break. And those team time conversations weren't planning to start until 2:05 anyway. So let's make sure we have a full break and start those at about 2:10 coordinators, if that works for you. And we'll change that on the agenda. Remember, the SCECH form will be linked in this agenda. We'll also send it in a follow-up email tonight, and that will need to be completed Thursday. That is right in the agenda. So everything you need is there, and will be continued to add. Tanya, we're going to say officially thank you right now. There's a lot of thanks and gratitude in the chat, and we're going to head into those breakouts. Let's just get that link and share that with you. We'll stay in this main room for any problems. Otherwise, have a great conversation and an awesome team time.